tonight. Our first reader is a dislocated poetic essayist and singer, musician, kindergarten substitute teacher. And the first time that she read this poem around me, I cried and couldn't stop. So I'm telling you, watch out for Vicki Rostovich.
Okay, I'm so nervous. It's amazing. I'm short as well as nervous. Yeah, I spent the day with first graders. There's some wacky fish. I call it a dislocated poetic essay because that's what it felt like when I wrote it, and it's in a few parts, so I'm just going to read it. I think it speaks for itself. My first, I guess my working title, even though I stole it from Salvador Dali, I guess, is The Persistence of Memory, and poetic essay in memory of Thomas Dieter Dürer. The prologue. Is this good?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Spirituality. I have friends so damaged, trying to rebuild, refurbish, redo self. Lost faith, crisis of faith, fait accompli. Cynicism peering through the thin shroud of tradition. Play dead for a while you rest, while you take a break. You deserve a break. Press your hands against the veil, then rip and shred it to pieces. Get yourself together. Just try to put it all together. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? And then the first section is called Persistence, and it starts out with a quote from the I Ching. Persistence means going on for a long time. The way of heaven and earth persists forever and does not come to an end. It is worthwhile if there is a place to go. Upon coming to an end, then there is a beginning. As long as the sun and the moon have the sky, they can shine forever. As long as the four seasons change, they can bring about development forever. Thunder and wind persist. Regret vanishes. I called Thomas today. He wasn't home and I talked to his mom. He's in the hospital. A collapsed lung, cancer in his lungs, cancer in his lymph nodes, a spleen 3 times the size it should be. Cancer? Yes. His mom said, it's only a matter of time. Thomas. I was stunned. I had no idea. He's only 31. I finally talked to Thomas today. He says he's going to walk out of the hospital, going to get better, going to move back to Seattle. Oh, Thomas, why didn't you tell me? He can't be dying. I'm only sure of one thing. I want to go be with him. I'm in Jackson, Mississippi. Right now, I'm eating soup at Thomas's folks' house. I'm all by myself. 12 hours of traveling, straight to the hospital, an overnight stay with Thomas. Now, I'm eating soup. Please let there be a tomorrow for Thomas and me. His body is emaciated. He has little to no muscle mass. He is truly skin and bones. I've never seen a body in this shape in real life. Only in documentaries of concentration camps. Only in commercials for starving children in Africa. There is a chest tube inserted into his right lung, a plastic tube carrying fluid out of his lung, an oxygen mask, tubes in his nose, his smooth olive skin now yellow as saffron. Currently, the medical industry is concerned solely with stabilizing his lungs, his breathing apparatus. Later, they will deal with the cancer. His father said only spontaneous regression of the disease will allow Thomas to leave the hospital. In layperson terms, that means a miracle. Sometimes you have to pray. You just don't have a choice sometimes. Thomas and I talk about everything but the present. He wants to go back and go forward in time. We avoid discussions of what's really going on right now. I try to avoid looking at the chest tube, especially when he is awake. But when he is sleeping, I stare at the plastic tube and watch the clear fluid and sometimes blood flow out. I'm waiting, I think, for the cancer to come seeping out as a black tar or a black pudding. His mom wonders aloud to me what kind of terrible sin she may have committed, which allowed this cancer to enter his body. I want to tell her there is no such thing as sin, or maybe there is sin, but no such thing as punishment for sin. But it's hard to compete right now with the tradition of dogma. My beliefs are being challenged as well. I merely listen to her enumerate her lifetime of sin, all her alleged transgressions. I hold her hand and listen to her cry. Today I rub Thomas all over. He especially loves having his feet, neck and back, forehead and temples massaged. He moans when it feels good. I bathed him too. When I was soaping up his pecker, he told me, "I haven't had a heart on in 6 months." "Do you miss that?" I asked. He looked up at me and said, "No, not really. If it ain't there, what's to miss?" I took my careful time washing him. I touched him like a lover. What choice did I have? All the while I was praying in my head. I stayed there with him. I rubbed him and washed him and fed him. I told him I loved him. That night I woke up to him gasping for breath and screaming in a whisper, "Vicky, Vicky." His oxygen mask had popped off. I put the mask back on him and rubbed his feet until he drifted off again. I couldn't sleep after that. I kept watch all night long. I have been spending so much time awake during this visit, I can't really fall asleep anymore. When I lie down and think I will crash instantly from exhaustion, instead, I start thinking nonstop. So, I have begun swallowing pain pills, very mild pain pills, just a little codeine to help me rest. I'm starting to miss dreaming. I'm a person who dreams every night, many dreams every night, dreams in black and white and color. I dream of people, mundane interactions, exotic and rare occurrences between us, even an occasional wet dream. I dream of water, often sliding through rivers, navigating instinctively, smooth as a fish. I dream of flying over great expanses of land with no worry of a perfect landing, landing perfectly wherever I choose. I lucid dream, which means I can choose at any time to alter the course of my dream. I have free will sometimes in my dreams. I have free will sometimes in my dreams. I have not dreamed in several days. These days and nights went on and on, Thomas getting weaker and weaker. Death is persistent. I don't even have to write about my goodbye with Thomas because it's engraved into my memory, but I will anyway. I went over to him, hugged him, and kissed him. Then I said, "If you don't get your ass out of this hospital, I'm going to have to come back and kick your ass." He grabbed me close to him, looked into my eyes. Then he touched my head, my hair, and my face with his fingers. He didn't say anything. I was paralyzed while he memorized me. I didn't take my eyes away from his. I didn't avert my eyes. When would I have this chance again? That night, I dreamed someone gave me a shiny new black Cadillac. I don't know who, and I don't know why. I only know it was a smooth ride. Part 2 is called Water Music. And It starts with a quote from the book Water Music by T.C. Boyle. But then suddenly, he knew what that refulgent, light-gathering object was, knew why they were offering it to him, knew what he would do and how he would survive. All at once, he could see into the future. He was no outcast, no criminal, no orphan. He was a Messiah. The old man handed him the clarinet. It was still damp from its soaking, but the pads were clear, the keys undamaged. The drum thumped, the flute skirled. He put it to his lips. They were smiling now, ranged round him like precocious children. He put it to his lips and played. I flew back to Missoula and started living my life again. Not like I was living my life in some renewed, full of dramatic gestures sort of way. I just got up every day, took a shower, and went to work. I did my job well and sunk myself into whatever goodness I could find. I kept busy in the long summer evenings playing basketball, hiking, riding my bike, spending time with friends. That summer I lived with a friend who had dogs, and his dog Sadie became my buddy, traipsing around with me wherever, sleeping at the foot of my bed each night, lapping at my beer, and listening to all the things I couldn't tell any human. That summer I witnessed two of my dearest friends get married, and a month later I hugged them after they told me they would be having a baby. It was a summer full of minutiae, and spotted with an occasional momentous event. I just kept trying to be happy. Thomas eventually did go home. He, or his body, rallied for a time, and he got to go home and be with his family. I kept in touch with him and tried to nurture optimism. But for me, deep down, not even so deep down, he and I had already said goodbye. I found myself trying to stay close and yet constantly disengaging. I felt crazy from it then, and I feel guilty about it still. One night in September, I dreamed that Thomas and I were having a long coffee visit, like we used to, just chatting about the events of our days, our current crushes or lovers, the NBA playoffs, the Phillies and the Braves. Then he stood up and told me he had to go, and that he wouldn't see me for a while. I stood up too, and we hugged close and fierce. Then he whispered something in my ear which seemed really important, which I forgot instantly upon waking. I awoke instantly, and I laid awake the rest of the night waiting for the phone to ring. At 7:30 the next morning, I heard it, and I picked up the receiver. And I remember hearing his mother tell me Thomas was dead. And I wish I could remember what Thomas told me in my dream. Did he tell me how to survive? Can anyone tell me? Where is my Messiah? Part 3 is called the Song of Solomon, and it starts out with a quote from the Song of Solomon. Oh, that you would kiss me with the kisses of your mouth, for your love is better than wine. Your anointing oils are fragrant. Your name is oil poured out. Therefore the maidens love you. Draw me after you. Let us make haste. My beloved is to me a bag of myrrh that lies between my breasts. My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyard. Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves. Behold, you are beautiful, my beloved, truly lovely. Our couch is green. The beams of our house are cedar. Our rafters are pine. As an apple tree among the trees of the woods, so is my beloved among young men. With great delight I sat in his shadow, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. Sustain me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am sick with love. Oh, that his left hand were under my head, and that his right hand embraced me. It takes a long time to find the someone who is the apple tree. I have had a lot of good love, and I have had some bad love in my life. How can love be bad? Can love be always good? Even if it's not bad while you have it, especially if it's not bad when you're in it, it hurts when it disappears. Will I ever be able to love again? It's hard to keep believing in it after it leaves you again and again. It's hard to even want it anymore after a while. But then that person comes along, that's someone who presses his lips soft and hard against yours until all you want to do is believe again. And you do. I am grateful for the resilience of the soul and for such things as hope and kisses and apples. Thanks for listening. It's been a little bit over a year since my friend died of cancer, and I'm just really happy that I had the opportunity to read that for you and for him. Thanks for listening. And now, I'd like to introduce our next reader, Zan Bacchus, who in 1990 received her MFA in fiction from the University of Montana. So, welcome, Zan.
Next is Janet Zupan. Oh, I was supposed to say that after. Up until the first notice for this festival came out, my name was Zan Bacchus, B-O-C-K-E-S. But because of what I call a fortuitous error, my nom de plume has now become Zan Bacchus, B-A-C-C-H-U-S. A change I've considered for years, but have never had sufficient motivation to achieve. Until now. Now I'm proud to be known as a relative of the Roman god of wine and revelry. And instead of being the god of wine and snivelry. But people always mispronounce my name. So, for this occasion, I've dug up all my death poems and was shocked to see how many there were. I mean, I've never been a dead person, so it seemed shocking that I should write so many poems about it. And I brought you a selection of a few and several others. The first one needs little elucidation, for it's a true story about a friend of mine's last moments. It's called Chronology of a Friend's Death. You made the decision while I was in Denver, where I tapped fingers rapidly on the arm of an airport chair, waiting for my flight. It was 11 a.m., and I was impatient. So, my dear, were you. By 2 p.m., you'd written the note, "I hope everyone can forgive me for doing this." As I trooped down the ramp for the Omaha plane, I forgave everything in the interest of living, in the interest of just getting back all right. While you started your car, I was on the runway, hammering down white light with sweating hands, and at the moment we lifted off, the big world disappeared behind your mother's garage door. The cool garage was quiet, but for the comfortable purring of your car and your own thoughts, falling in your mind like coins of lead. Over Nebraska, over the dials of farms and patchwork fields, we flew through clouds stacked miles high, white anvils standing in the sky as if to prove something. I might have seen your soul fly up, a thin green thing like a balloon, rising through the cauliflower clouds, a speck, a lens from a pair of broken sunglasses. But I paid no heed. It was only my eyes, and I wasn't even thinking of you. When we touched ground near 5 o'clock, I felt in every part of me the slam of sky hitting earth, and your mother's discovery, and the sense of an end where something else begins. This next one was inspired by a 2-year stay on Guam, the island of Guam in the Western Pacific. And near Guam is an island called Saipan, which was a site of a lot of battles during World War II in the Pacific Theater. And there's a place on that island in the northern part of Saipan where approximately 23,000 Japanese soldiers and civilians jumped off in a mass suicide rather than be captured by Japanese or American soldiers. This one's called Bonsai Cliff, Saipan. Prayer sticks chatter in the steady wind, a wind that blew your cries across the world and rings in my ears some 50 years later. You followed your wife and children into the hungry sea, which roars like a volcano at my feet, swallowing, swallowing. You may not have looked back, may not have seen my own father's face, white with shock, dumb with what war had driven you to do. To give your life for the freedom of death, for a pride no American can understand. This was your gift. Your descendants have left prayers in these bushes where your feet stumbled, left hope that you or I would never bloody the shore again. The next poem is also kind of a political poem. I was born in Germany, and when I was 11 years old, our family went back to Germany to revisit the places that, where I was born, and my father was around when he was in the army. One of the places we visited was Dachau, one of the concentration camps, and of course by then it had been all, smoothed over and prettied up into a little museum. But it really left a really strong impression on me. This is called Dachau, when I was 11. 30 years after the ovens went out, I paced headquarters in my size 4 penny loafers, looking at the pictures. More shoes and boots than lay paired in my mother's closet, rose in piles with scattered mates, empty, muddy, laces tangled and cut. I saw several my size. In the next picture, the hairless heads and hands and legs and feet without their shoes lay jumbled in a pit like parts of dolls. I wanted to leave the pennies in my shoes at the door, hoped they could help, but knew 2 cents meant nothing. That night I dreamed of skeletons sharing bread, of smoke from the ovens blackening the sky, and of those shoes, muddy and laceless, pumping to my door. This next one is a poem that kind of speaks of the movement from life into hibernation or dormancy, something I call a small death, which is necessary in the cycle of life and death. 7 is kind of a spiritual number, I guess, in numerology. It means that a person or thing is important on a grander, more universal scale than other numbers. It's called 7 Ways of Moving. 1. A patch of light moves across the floor. Is it moonlight or sun dipping low in ice? No matter. The light moves, a dance of Earth's shadow. 2. This car pulls a U-Haul through a tunnel of dark wind. The city we are moving to flares in the distance. We are the moving, all we own packed tight under beetle wings. It takes everything to hold us to the road. I imagine a U-Haul woven into a nest of flames. All we own is fire. 3. I am moving through the light of trees moving in the wind. Black, yellow, yellow, black. A train thrown from its track. The sizzle of yellow grass taller than my head swallows me whole. 4. My heart flops back and forth, a thing reckoning. One day I'll give it up and float with my face in the sun. 5. Time is a measure of change, says a man in a blue suit, steepling his fingers. What will he think when he becomes a dog, fetching mossy sticks for an indolent master? 6. You move away. I feel my heart trying to pull you back. Feel the pain of movement stretched to breaking. I cannot survive this and emerge the same. 7. I am moving down a shaft of light in a slow, floating dance. When I realize what I am, it is too late to avoid becoming a speck of dust. Still, I know I must be changing. Okay, this next one is one of the things I do when I write poems is I kind of meditate on an idea or a word, and I just take an idea and play with the meaning of it and the sound of the words and the rhythm of the words and stuff, and just basically have a good time with that. This one I chose the word imagination, and what followed was this kind of meditation on that whole idea. So the poem's called Imagination, faltering, stumbling, playing dead. The door spanks your butt on the way out. The shock brings your body needle reel beyond all dreams. It's the season to guess the guest's gifts, to lay down arms in rip red fields, to cradle your best friend's head and sleep like spoons in the spoon slot. In the end, what is left of love but this mute scenario, this give and take of soft, warm air? Still, the highways lure you on, your thoughts a thin gauze curtain. Check the mileage, check the oil, check the landmarks as they rise and fall behind. It's a journey to all dead ends, to cul-de-sacs of dreams kept alive by your sullen respiration. What you give for the lifelines in your mind is more than life itself. Remember this and die for no other reason. This next one is another kind of meditation thing. It's also a poem that deals with depression, especially the cyclical nature of it and how it tends to spiral you downward into it deeper and deeper until you have no hope of getting out of it. So I hope this one will cheer you up a little bit. It's called 9. 9 black maids in an empty corridor. These are the days that have passed. 3's are the threads that sew them together. A father, son, and someone's ghost are on the road tonight, eating by matchlight, sleeping in the ditch. Each darkened maid could have had a spouse. Each father's son has a ghost of a chance. But I have gone too far these days, dampened my matches, lost my ditch. The thick black snakes choke on their tails. I eat myself and cannot swallow. 3 bites, and I take 9 breaths, 1 for each life I've led. I'm on the last one. 9 months in mama's belly, 9 years ducking my father's fist, 9 years since he became a ghost, 9 years more he's haunted me. Father, son, and someone's ghost are on the road tonight, and I cannot last 1 life more. 1 more night of rain, 1 more bite of flesh, 1 more night waiting to be murdered in my sleep. I lose count. The alchemy of my imaginings makes hell seem so deep. The cycle turns with no shadow and no sleep. This next one is also a kind of confessional sort of poem in which I try to convey a mental state of fear and general messed upness. It's called What I Tell Myself When the Twilight of the Gods Dims Whatever Sense I Have of Reason. It's gone bad, opening the fridge. I know I must eat, but feel too full of life to stomach applesauce or oatmeal, not hungry. 3 days ago, I walked along the river with friends in auburn shade, laughing at myself and them and a dog who followed us looping through bushes. So long ago, 3 days, and now I'm reduced to ashes smoldering, like the mattress I set on fire years back, in back of our house years back, and the tirade of days stinging my wet eyes from tears of unknown sources bangs its continual mockery into the shape of my soul, like a blacksmith hammering iron. My heart is iron, and I begin to turn animal and distant, afraid, But I am not afraid of anything, anyone, even though it's a short trip from here to there, following the thread of twilight. From whatever began to incense me, the bloody incense smell of rage works in my brain, like electric fuses shattering light, until someday all this will pass. Under the bridges I've tried to build between me and you, they are gone but not forgotten, and the structure begins to take hold, and the pieces stay, then laughter is no longer a lonely thing or unreasonable. This last one, finally, I found a sort of death poem that isn't so depressing. This is my attempt at a prose poem, and I basically just define a prose poem as a thing that looks like prose but tastes like poetry. This is called Eating Ourselves. I tasted my arm last week in an arm sandwich I ate just before going out the door to play in the pond outside, where fish are bigger than the trees and their fantails stream in the breeze like the breath of death. Caught a whiff on the stairs. It smelled like buckwheat flapjacks and antifreeze. I could not help but laugh, for the last time I poured antifreeze on my buckwheat flapjacks, it spilled on my trousers and opened a curiously wide hole there into a moonlit place behind someone's garage. The children were watching each other, rapt with fascination, as they defecated in a performance-style show based more on quantity than quality. I guess we'd all like to be in that picture with our sticks in hand, poking the faintly steaming mass and making faces. Such art cannot be sold in the store where I ordered. We do not sell that there. We only sell skull caps for the workers, overflowing with guitar strings and posies that force their way up from the roots of all people's sorrow. We sell those for 25 cents a piece, and they sell like hotcakes that have burned so thoroughly they make better mortarboards themselves, though we don't sell those out of season. What brings me back to the point I get lost from is a sense of embarrassment about my pride, or pride about my embarrassment, all of which is based loosely on the profoundly human notion that my nose turns slightly skyward every time I introduce myself. I'm a bear talking backwards in the night. Thank you. Now I have to say this. Next is Janet Japan, who got her MFA in poetry in 1996, and she'll be reading from her thesis, Water Maps. Welcome, Janet.
Is that loud enough? Relocation. The neighboring brick burns. From our sill, I see shadows of firemen hacking at ordinary walls. Local residents lining up like tired suitcases along the walk. Behind a hard face, every breathless space swallows itself. The empty shafts fume and smoke fills the stalled elevator. I watch for the sudden crumbles, a hiss of falling walls, muffled brick claps and red dust, the final gestures of combustion, when implosion's driving fist pushes flames toward the turn, when the struggle loses urgency, when lives fighting disintegration turn back to their own beating hearts. You sleep on a bed behind me, the tunnels of lights and riddled shadows framing your face to a crescent in the blue blanket. This room is nearly empty, save the beds and hollow drawers, the carpet pads that follow some previous occupant.
Boxes marked kitchen are stacked in the hall. Our lamp, shadeless, looks thin in the middle of a room where we catch ourselves whispering to avoid the sounds, our voices bouncing, then hanging in the startled air, reminding us of all the words we hadn't meant to use. Tomorrow, we'll unpack things our voices know. I reach to pull the sheets from around your tossing and hear your breath, the only steady hush under the odd clank of midnight ladders. Loose change from the day flashes on the night table. I read a quote regarding this honoring of the dead who were honored, that we should remember that every night brings death's rehearsal and every morning the practice of resurrection. And when I thought of how to pull together some poems for this reading, it struck me that it's great luck to be celebrating the eve of the dead because we're just expectant, just hanging there in anticipation of visiting souls on November 2nd. And I figure that's a kind of a limbo to treasure. This next poem's entitled Grace. Uncle Charlie and Nana were dancing near winter on the roof of our porch in the dark. She sang a loud rosary. He sported new hosiery, and the dog kept the beat with his bark. Good Nana suggested the trio take respite, so they jumped to the soft ground below. It was there Charlie thought of the plans that were shot for learning to play a banjo. Banjo, banjo. He yearned to play the banjo. Now Nana was quick to know her son's grief. She'd lost a few tunes in her time. She conspired with the pup to cheer Charlie up, and they offered him gin with some wine. Soon, all of life's edges were lost to new pledges. Nana said, "You could take up ballet." Charlie quickly confessed he loved bullfighting best and dreamed of a roaring olé. Olé, olé. He dreamed of a roaring olé. The night was a coat of gentle forgiveness. The moon lent its milk to the scene. Dear Nana and Charlie, the dog we'll call Larry, climbed back to the roof where they'd been. Charlie, feeling subdued, softly whistled Hey Jude, while the dog scratched his back on the shingles. Nana held to tradition and sang a rendition of Our Father in the thrilling alto, alto, alto. Our Father in thrilling alto. That was a poem I wrote in nonsense verse, in case you didn't notice, for my Nana, Hannah. It's a true story. She came to this country from County Cork, Ireland, and the stories I've heard about her were that she lived in just extreme poverty in San Francisco and had to raise rabbits in an alley to feed her children. And as I was growing up, her life greatly improved, but I was always extremely nervous in her presence. She was just a little too stoic for me to be comfortable with. But in this Hannah poem, she's dancing. She's still singing her Hail Marys, which I think she would have insisted on, but she danced. She made her dance. I lost my father when I was very young, about 11 years old. And I've discovered as I've grown older that there's a real beauty in that because I've kept a child's eyes fixed on him and it's never wavered. And when I think about my father, I can recall that he could imitate a horse's whinny just with incredible precision. He used to drive a car up the road. We lived in the desert. He'd drive a car up Shoshone Road and make a left on our street, whinnying all the way. He also used to make us name all the spiders in the house. We had Homan and Heinrich and Gertrude living in our bathtub, and we were not allowed to harm them. This next poem, my dad was a pilot, and so a lot of our pets had pilots' names. We had two desert tortoises named Sonic and Boom. And then the horse that figures in this next poem was Vertigo. Maze. My father stands straight as the Joshua, rooted at mid-corral. He catches loose reins, swings himself across the naked back of our Palomino, heavy-bellied and gnawing the dry hitch. They cast a mean glance in a desert drinking them in, sand soaking hooves, desert barrels of water poking fetlocks. Like Joshua, my father will try a soldier's distance of hitch and stumble over cholla and sage. He reins the horse from gallop to lope, a heavy hand for patience. He knows the naked risk of journeys toward water. Naked faces of horse and rider wince in the desert glare. Trees dot the stretch, and each heavy shadow is a person looming alone. The Joshua, milky with frenzies of yucca moths, rains of wings hissing at dark into the hitch of yellow bowls at limb's end. A hitch in my stance makes a stranger shadow, like naked bones, but really a child, wondering if rains take on life of their own. Turn a father to desert paths that leave him sleepy, Joshua trees unmoved as his heavy head makes a cradle in the sand. The heavy river at the horizon moves in a crooked hitch, and I watch my father, the horse, each Joshua they pass. The river draws them closer, naked and clear in its offer to quench the desert and the disbelief at a sudden smell of rain. They're distant now, and the jerk of rain's a guess. The horse's head droops heavy as she dawdles over grease weeds, desert scraps not worthy of the blood it takes to hitch the dry wisps from nearly naked land, just shy now of the green turn from Joshua trees and snaky desert. I'll imagine the last hitch of rains over riverbanks, heavy with live oaks, beyond each Joshua, naked. And this next poem accompanies the last. It's entitled Blind Horse. Mothering her luckless sockets, I keep the horse to bring on. Sorry, let me start over. Mothering her luckless sockets, I keep the mare to borders, guiding her through an afternoon cruel with wind, and tumbleweeds breaking embraces at flank, needling her lunatic dark. We ride fields mined in dens and burrows, timid animals hiding just below a crumbling earth, below hooves and panic, a horse's trip and spook, her wild barrel through the unsympathetic terrain, saddle burning with sun, a keen bouquet carving our shadows, clearing bushes by the tips of their leaves. There was a road we used to take to Palmdale, California. I lived in the high desert Napa Valley, home of Roy Rogers. But anyway, we used to take this highway into Palmdale, and it was a really strange trip because it was, at the time, as a child, it seemed like just empty desert. But there was always this weird moment where you drove into this town that was full of fruit. And they sold fruit, at fruit stands. It was named Pear Blossom, and it was just an odd experience. This poem is set along that highway. Prodigal daughter. I'm the wind in full moan, no matter how he flips the wing window. Wrappers hiss on his dash. I've cracked a weedy face in the road he travels, tapped valves loose in the truck he never paid off. Speeding down Pear Blossom Highway, he sees one after another pinyon or yucca contorted from years of gust and devils. 40 miles through their squatting shadows is the only town full of fruit stands bordered by night. The Ford cuts a vast shadow across their wooden faces, and he thinks of my skin, smooth as cherries. By the end of today's map, he'll fall 200 miles short his destination. He'll rest, exhausted, in a Palmdale curve. The star-popped night is round as an eye, fair as the coyote giving a father's cry from a canyon. Dreams rock him until sandstorms come between him and the horizon. When he wakes, I'm there, hungry, around creosote and shifting shoulders of a dune, moaning low. And I'll finish with a poem entitled Reunion. Lean muscles of desert run up from the Mojave River. We could find delicate naps in sandy cores. Imagine the final lines of small animals, frantic scurries, moonlight, the nimble clutch of owls who took their time. We could take ours, hands held warm in the air, our skins losing lines that had given us away. Curled to a wreath around me, you'd be the lizard pointing horns. I'd be succulent, a saguaro in summer blossom. Haughty in our armor, we'd flash tongues at the sun. Thanks. When I first moved to Missoula and realized that she was the person who put together the second rendering series, so I had the great fortune of helping her out that year and getting to know her and her love for the written word. In 1996, we both earned our MFAs in poetry from the University of Montana. Betty grew up in Missoula. How many people can claim that? Please welcome her. Thanks.
I'm going to read an essay that I wrote about a friend of mine who died from cancer a couple of years ago. Someone with whom I went to grade school. This is called Alive to Each Other. Is this right? The last time that I saw Vicki was out at her place near Sun River, Montana, that she shared with her second husband and their 3 teenagers from first marriages. It was 1 month before her death. She had known for a long time that she was going to die and had come home from Sloan Kettering to be surrounded by her family and her animals. I turned off at the main road and drove in the direction of the river, where their ranch-style stone house overlooked the water. It was August, and the gold of wheat and the sun-on dust kicked up from my tires reminded me of identical summer days that we had spent together years ago in an endless-seeming childhood. Her 2 large hunting dogs came running to meet me. It had been 30 years since we had had an actual conversation. 6 years ago, I had watched her from a distance at a reunion that our 2 high schools held together. She was smoking like a casino cashier, still looking like a cheerleader with a little more makeup. I hadn't talked to her then. What was there to say? She had been a lot of fun in high school, and I had been aloof and afraid. I still thought of Vicki as she had been in several stages of grade school life. We had both lived near Victory Field, a vacant lot that was a vestige of an airfield used in the last war, where we played baseball. When we needed extra money for candy, comics, and paper dolls, we created an impromptu soda fountain in my parents' garage. If we were angry with each other, the ultimate threat was, I won't invite you to my birthday party. Since we pulled this one out at odd times of the year, it had no real force, but the radical nature of the threat was what we understood. When we began 6th grade at St. Anthony's, the word went out that ballroom dancing lessons would be given at the Episcopal Church. We had an old Monsignor from Ireland in charge of our school who forbade that we enter another church, even if it wasn't the church itself, and even if it wasn't for services. Our school was staffed entirely by nuns, and no one disobeyed an order from the Monsignor. As much as we all begged, our parents would not cross his decision, except for Vicki's mother, an exciting and a scandalous woman, the year before she had married the man for whom she worked, after he left his wife for her. Vicki and I used to wait for her after school to see the boxes of beautiful clothes that she would bring home. Invariably, she was dressed in spike heels and a tight skirt. Vicki's clothes, first I changed the identity of the person so no one would recognize it. I thought, no, I can call her real name, Vicki. Vicki's clothes were mostly hand-me-downs until she could earn the money to buy her own. My only picture of her is on the playground wearing a huge coat with sleeves hanging 6 inches too long. But the thought of dancing lessons seemed to inspire her mother's flamboyance on her daughter's behalf. In the cloakroom, where the rest of us left our wet wool mittens and rabbit earmuffs, on Wednesdays, Vicki could display her pink patent box that held her black patent dancing shoes. It was like looking directly at sin, and she was a celebrity. The nuns could do nothing and chose to feel sorry for Vicki, whose mother wouldn't give her direction. That was the year when our class crowned the Virgin Mary in the church on May 1st. One afternoon in preparation, we walked from the vacant lot and up an alley to where there were lilac and apple blossoms leaning over fences. We cut long branches and stuffed them in paper bags we brought, and then ran up the next alley to Bonner Park, jumped on the tilt-a-whirl, and made ourselves sick. That night, we sat on my parents' living room floor and made crowns of the ceremonial flowers for our hair. It was a time for getting into trouble, and although I couldn't take the dancing lessons, I could go along with Vicki in shaving my legs and wearing nylons to the crowning, against the displeasure of the nuns. Our favorite nun, a woman 6 feet tall, dignified and fair, wouldn't speak to us for a week. We were crushed but resolute. What would I talk to Vicki about at a high school reunion? Instead, I found a boy who had also gone to St. Anthony's, who was drunk and funny and had come dressed in shorts and a t-shirt. We danced and left to sit in the parking lot in someone's Model T convertible to laugh and to tell stories until the sprinklers came on in the morning, when I gave him a ride to where he was supposed to have spent the night. I was nervous going to see Vicki when all of these years she had lived only 160 miles away and we had never gotten together. Her mother met me at the door, a little chunkier and calmer, wearing slacks and Rockport Oxfords. The house had huge windows and high ceilings for an effective view. An entire eastern Montana bluff at the far edge of expansive wheat fields on the river. I remembered her telling me that someday she wanted a farm with lots of animals. And here she came toward me down the hall. She was thin and her deep brown eyes looked medicated. Still that sweet little voice, although labored with raspy breath. She smiled benevolently at me and said how good it was for me to come. Her husband, an amiable man who was pudgy and blonde, looked a lot like the golden retriever outside. He shook my hand and asked me to sit down. While I held her hand on the couch, I noticed that Vicki had on a baggy smock that didn't quite hide the shunt in her shoulder for pain medication. She was horribly thin. Her wig was a perfect replica of the Italian bob of her cheerleader days. We talked about teenagers and conservative politics. Her husband became quite animated about federal control and how we should secede from the Union. I told him that I didn't think I could go quite that far. Vicki would periodically give him looks of love and loss that he received with a blank, uncomprehending face. Her mother sat in another chair with a little lap dog that would bounce from her to someone else and back again. We all made small talk about people we knew, and Vicki had something kind to say about everyone. I had this story that I wanted to share with her, and took a chance that it would evoke the numinous memory of nothing in particular, just a time that we shared that was unique to us together. I had a difficult time telling it because I started to laugh and could barely stop often enough to keep going. Vicki, I said, do you remember when we were in 8th grade and I was spending the night at your house, our 2 boyfriends came over and we all went for a walk? It was fall and cold out and we walked down an alley, and when we walked down the alley, my boyfriend kissed me. I had never been kissed before and you and I had fantasized a lot about what that would be like. It was icky, horrible, wet and cold. When we went back to your house, I told you that it was just like kissing a dead, wet fish. The next day we went to school and you told someone because pretty soon everyone knew and he wouldn't speak to me. That was 31 years ago, and sometimes I see him working on a street crew and he is still hostile. It's true, too. So sad. By this time, I could hardly control myself. I was laughing so hard. Vicki's wig seemed to suddenly come alive. Its little ends that looked like high school hair that had been carefully trimmed of all split ends vibrated. Her calm erupted. I did not tell anyone. I am not a blabbermouth. I was shocked. I had insulted her. She was dying and I had insulted her. I started babbling something about not meaning that it was funny, that it was a great memory. It was no big deal, just funny. I made it worse. I said that it was one of my major memories I had of her. Such a sick sense of humor. I could see that she was fighting to restore her great calm. She achieved it. I looked over at her mother and husband, and they had confused, strained smiles. I wouldn't let go of her hand. Please don't go, Vicki. Please don't leave me like this. We changed the subject. Her husband confided that his first marriage had ended because they both had liked to party too much. He said that he had given that up. Some things come too late. He looked the part. What did he do now? Agitate for secession, about as futile as a kegger at 35. Well, he had helped Vicki with the ranch that was hers when her first husband died, and they helped each other with their children. It was time for dinner, and I said that I had to go. At the door, Vicki's mother told me to give her best to my parents, and I told her that I would. Vicki hugged me at the car. I knew that it was the last time that I would see her, but it didn't seem real to think that way. She was weak, that was all. She smiled, turning her head slightly to look up at me, and said gently, "It's all so simple." What is? Death? No. Life? No. As I drove home, I had the uncomfortable feeling of anger. Shameless anger at a dying person who I would never see again. She had resigned herself to dying as a good girl who agreed to go through all of the stages of grief appropriately, as laid out by the psychiatric community. I knew that she could have resigned herself and still recognized that it was damn complicated to live and a shame to have to die. Maybe she did, but if so, she wanted to appear to be a saint anyway. I decided to hold on to that anger when I got ready for bed that night. I imagined Vicki alone, like a newborn, cuddled with her blanket, when suddenly a word would come into her mind. Blabbermouth. And she would get angry all over again. This ruins everything. Sainthood, revised history, and easy exit. I didn't go to her funeral. All of the high school girls who were her friends rented a van to keep each other company and went to say goodbye to a person who had died. The last time that I saw Vicki, we were alive to each other. Thank you. I want to introduce Linda Wadwick. Linda Wadwick, who moved to Missoula from Great Falls because she felt Missoula was a more comfortable place, to which I agreed. It's a wonderful place to live if you're a poet. Linda has lived here for 5 years, and she said that she's a non-academic student of life.
Since I have such a complicated last name, I frequently use the name Gibbs when I'm ordering pizzas and stuff. Okay, I'm gonna read a bunch of short poems tonight. When I'm working on stuff, I have a really limited attention span, so all my stuff is really short. And I always keep my eyes open, just magazines and TV, and because I never know when some little thing, like some quote or some strange little situation is just going to get my imagination going. This first poem, I was reading an article in the New Yorker about this dancer named Blanca Lee. She's a Spanish dancer, and she was talking about when she used to own this bar in Madrid, and she was describing this sort of motley situation that happened, and I thought it was pretty great. And it starts out with a quote from her that says, "Blood on the pavement outside a bar looks so bad." Sleep is a wild thing I chase by the river. 1,000 yawning doorways make their way to my bed. In town there is always some arguing, one heart too big and one devouring one, darting small. Last night, a man I had not seen before drowned his pain to this music, only to be wrecked by the songs of heartbreak. In love or laughter's price, he ground broken glass to his wrists, spilling himself on the bar. Nina pulled him outside to a taxi. Blanca followed, mopping, afraid of police. If they come, she stops the show downstairs, tells them she dresses like this always, her skin a fever, skirt still spinning like a quick fire. The flamenco I love because it's lonely, she bent to me one night, flying through my mezcal, beating no sound like wings of smoke. She loves a mathematician who paints the walls of buildings with faces and names. My sadness eats me like a strange flower. Today it rained. Late morning merchants covered their jewelry with tarps. At noon the streets were sweating. Steam danced around my feet. This next poem I wrote for T.S. Eliot's wife after seeing Tom and Viv. I don't know if any of you have seen that. It's about their relationship. And she died in a mental hospital after living there 12 years and, spending her entire life in his shadow, basically. This is called The Wasteland. At night, my husband turns to me, obliterated. Behind the little glasses, the starched white shirt, he is screaming. This is my history. I see the poems still sticky, being born. The poet eats cake and rare meat with his hands. He becomes not the forest, but the painting of the forest. Wish blanket blue, Jesus green. I will forget that he sees my doctor frequently, looking at charts and discussing my blood. Wool-sleeved, contrived, he keeps my anger a secret. He studies my passion, knowing the lesson there. I starve and carry a knife in my purse. Now, at parties, women pour him glasses of wine. Poor Tom, they purr, vying for his frozen hands. It comes to this. I used to dance on the great lawn, drunk on wishbones. I ran in circles. The fire in my head was real fire, grabbing my heels. I was not afraid. I knew I could outrun the flames, their sprinting tongues. This one is called Elevator to the Gallows. I named it after a Louis Malle film, where it's very French, everybody's plotting to kill each other all the time, and everyone goes crazy in the process, and they all end up dead or arrested in the end. So I thought it was a great title, so I just called it Elevator to the Gallows. A blonde woman talks in a low voice on the phone. Her face fills the frame. We are watching, close enough to see that her eyes are wet, worlds away. We wait for them to spill. They don't. 1/2 hour, she whispers. A statement loaded with danger, like praying. At the meeting place, she is staring straight ahead, milky with absence. She waits 1 hour, 2. She doesn't know if her husband, the millionaire, is dead. Her eyes burn down the street into the night. We have the advantage of knowing her lover's in a jam. He's stuck at the scene, dropping matches down the elevator shaft. 2 teenagers, hungry for adventure, have stolen his car. There must be a way out. He is running circles around the office building in his mind. We have left him fighting panic in the dark. Now, she is walking through fear's alleyways, repeating his name. Haven't we been here, piecing our hearts together? We want to take her face in our hands and tell her everything. Say, selfish. Say, believe it. This poem is for Billie Holiday. It's called Strange Fruit. Tonight, I am an animal in my furs. Behind me, the applause laps up like an ocean. Backstage, they take the pin from my hair, ignored behind flowers. When I go back, My ears are glowing with blood. It's on my gown, holding everything back. My bones soaked white with perfume and poppies. Hey lady, a woman hollers, why don't you do that sexy song you sing, the one with the bodies swinging from the trees? Sometimes life is a tangle of cities flying by. I remember them by what my presence reveals, my being there. It has been said that no one sings the word hunger like I do, or the word love. Medicine. This morning at 8, the man in room 317 died. His wife cried into a handkerchief. I heard her tell the nurse he spent so much time trying to hold on to his life. No one told him how to accept death. I disinfect the halls at night. Back and forth, long mop strokes strengthen my back. Outside, the slow moon glows, immune. Salvation. The cats are big enough to farm the land themselves. Sometimes the air is so thick in the house none of us can stand to be there. Not my mother. She's too tired from working. She makes her back pull much more than it can. Not my brother, who, at 13, is so scared of thunder when it rains he heads for the cellar, breaks things. He's ashamed. He knows he's too old to be afraid like that, but it's understandable, this blind association with the heavens, when you grow up in a house too far from the road, where each day on every wall Christ's likeness shows what it's like to be graceful, to be scarred. Nailed up in gleaming white, the names of the dead come slowly from thinned out lips. What men can do, the horrors conceived in the bones of a hand. This is another one of those poems that, I was watching this program about the Ebola virus, and I don't know, it doesn't need too much explanation, but there was this quote that I heard and was like, wow, so I constructed this sort of fictitious situation around it. This is called Duel. All around us, the night pushes hot breath at faces. Those who are able to sleep run at it, shameless, relenting. I am dreaming. In this dream, I've wandered into the trees, away from the sisters. There is a large fire back there. Where I am, it is very dark. I hear them singing out the names of the dead. I make out Maria, Matthew, Ezekiel. I am dreaming. I don't see the figure cross the worn floorboards or hear the feet. I am not thinking of unbelievable things, screaming for God, bodies turning to thick, wet dust from the inside and blood, rivers of it, or burning beds. The hand on my arm. Her voice, usually beautiful, whispers, come quickly. Sister Beata is dying. I dart out of sleep. I see that the moon, in a chaos of blue light, has filled the room. This one is for Vincent Van Gogh. I'm covering all the crazy characters here tonight. It's called Theo's Brother. In the morning, everything is wet and getting green. He wakes up and paints clouds, a prairie, a sea. He curls into a moon shape in the field, waits, and adds dark birds to the pictures and gashes of black oil. He feels the sun hit the blood in his neck, walks back to town with lips smeared from paint, goes up flights of stairs and eats bread with that mouth. He kisses a full cup of whiskey with that mouth. At night, warm winds tug burlap off the window. All afternoon he tried to fix it. If I can't now, can I ever? He thinks. He pulls a pillow to his chest. Outside, things sink together with spring. The garden falls in. Right, a few more. This one is in the voice of Jack Kerouac. His brother died at like 9 years old from a heart disease, and he was a very, very strange spiritual young man. This is called T. Jean 4 years. The little street endures in mid-afternoon. I play my records in the living room. My scowling father sits in the corner. He reads Gerard the Funnies and touches his head. The house is filled with pictures of Saint Therese. My mother says to pray for peace, for showers of roses. Last night, my sister Nin's dolls fell off her shelf in the rattle of something. Gerard tells me restless spirits live underneath their house. They are old, he says, older than this whole town. Our father is hardened with work and dead dreams and love for the serious pale sun. I hear the man, mon pauvre petit loup, my poor little wolf, you were born to suffer. My brother's heart is like a tiny bird. It flies, exhausted, straight up to the sun. I'm going to read a couple more. This one, it's a true story. It was a book on. You might recognize the subject matter. It's called Record. The coldest January in years leaves the town breathing quick through scarves. Cars turn paralytic in the night, diamond-thick stars of frost on glass. Thaw chokes the ground with mud, whole sections of road blocked for rising water. A student ends up in the river one morning, name withheld, and by noon the shoals of ice thud heavy, crushed with hammers. On cigarette break, I hear cannon blasts from the bank. 5 days turns up nothing. Rescue workers shake their heads and give up. It's a scam, my friend says over whiskey. He probably skipped town on a train. Smog collects in the valley, covering our skins. On every street, ruined winter gardens darken and swell, impatient, gorged on rain. This last one's called Katie Did. Katie walked the floodplain and looked for diamonds in the dirt. Summer came and choked the low fields with river water. It creeped up and took hold of her heart, so that year Katie fed the fires in it with gin and young men. She lived on the end of the street, the end closest to the dense dark water of the river where it cleaves between trees, moving slow and powerful somewhere behind her house, and it usually comforted Katie, but made her nervous that season. Everything damp and unmanageable, and she began to dream of planets and smashed guitars, something chasing her somewhere. All September, she invited neighborhood boys for tea and stories, and they kept her company, and she sang sad songs with her angel's voice, and she was young still, but haunted. Each day she grew more afraid of the dark water freezing in the field, her dreams, her sweet, strong voice, and most believed that Katie gave in to her visions and disappeared like a spark in the rain, her tired heart run ragged from loneliness and love. October 17th, the moon chases Katie down a dirt road. Autumn flame like a nightmare gone wild in the sky. She stops, holds the broken six-string in her arms and waits. She does not even blink. Up the block, those neighborhood boys dream lazily of her mouth, the smoke in her long brown hair. Our last reader tonight is Cheryl Murphy.
4th and 5th grade students that literature is a dialogue through history, and that it's our responsibility and our duty to tell the truth about our stories so that we're not left out of it. And I always think that good poetry demands a response. When I go to a reading and I like the work, I want to go home and write. This poem that I'm going to read now is about the same topic that Linda's poem was about, Ryan Cross. First they said he jumped, then slipped. Now he went swimming after a party, walking the banks of the river with a friend or a teammate, depends upon who tells the story. All day I felt them blasting the ice in the river. This drowned boy's body is hidden by death. The nature of most of the universe begs discovery. The dogs lift their noses to something on the air. The demeanor of the dark matter is not certain. We only know it does not shine. Now his father and brother, trapped in the prison house of sight, watch the men dynamite the locked-up river. Wanting to find him, afraid to find him, looking for his hands, not wanting to see them, his hair, not wanting to see his yellow hair. And what about his clothes? Who will take them? A crowd has gathered. Someone is selling soft drinks from a cooler. The dead go to the movies and sit on the laps of the living and suck at their lips like tomcats to babies. They lick the milk off our mouths for us. They are sighing great musty sighs of bad air. They place their long noses along our necks and snuggle like puppies into our armpits and groins. They moan. And we are laughing at the movie. That's what we believe in. What we had for lunch. The price of fixing the car. The spirits continue swarming. They vomit diamond rings and snakes. They've rigged the basement with invisible pulleys and hoists. No matter. Einstein says we can't see the future because the light cones are tipped in the wrong direction. It's too bright. We are the future's dead, dazzled. After I wrote this poem, I thought that Louise Gluck had channeled it through me. But I read everything she has, and she's not dead yet either. This is called By the Upturned Boat. The old woman fell, broke her hip, and could not visit her husband in the nursing home for almost a year. When she finally arrived, his body had grown scales like a fish everywhere. She spent hours brushing them away. Beneath the peel, his skin was new. When he woke, dull-eyed, he would not let go of her hand. He could feel the lapping and the little tug that is stronger than air. When eventually she left, he began wriggling backwards into the sand, beneath the blankets of the shoreline, where the light bends, where the lost dog sleeps, where the dead child takes his first steps. I have a friend that's 94. She has osteoporosis. She broke her leg. She used to wear Chanel suits that she'd made, and fingernails and hair. And she went to the nursing home, and they put her in diapers and on Zoloft. She began talking to the dead. My friend whose mother died recently told me that her mother told her some of the things my friend told me. That people in white coats came and took her away, and then brought her back. She told me that her husband, who had been dead 30 years, was back and had married the woman that she sat with in the cafeteria. This poem is called Minneapolis Summer Dream. When I come to her door, she is sleeping. I am finally getting used to her skeletal appearance. I open her curtains and then the window, and she says my name. This breeze, soft as cotton, straight from heaven, stretch out, doll. She commands, and I am glad to. We see a translucent daytime moon, and I know that everywhere I go now, in my life, This moon will be frozen over the nursing home while we line up in her narrow bed watching it. This moon, the tattoo I wear inside my eyes. Soon a nurse will come in to close the window and look at my dress, how the buttons and back gap at my prone posture, how dirty and rough my bare feet are in her little bed. Arlene and I are real, but we are not possible. We are somewhere between death and the West. Here is how we always said goodbye. Quickly, lightly, no tears, no words of farewell, only so long or next time. When you leave, she tells me, you take Earth with you. Her head drops back under the pillow, delicate bones of the skull. And I think, because we have cried together, we have said our goodbyes. And she weeps, my beautiful, loyal friend. I have to calm myself. I will imagine now that she is sleeping. She laughed, and I saw her name typed inside her mouth. My eyes watered and my heart stuck until I remembered her dentures. They put her name on things here and then they lose them. She is wearing someone else's clothes, name tags inside. And she says, life just keeps swishing along. My mother tells me on the phone that Arlene is no longer making any sense. I am holding my good friend's baby in my arms while a second friend reads her poem about a lover that died. I am breaking in my chest. I cannot breathe and I will drown. I pull the baby's blanket over my eyes. She sleeps on. My friend stops her poem. None of this will ever finish. A loss too big to contain. Death's approach made us lovers too late. And the poem that I mentioned in this poem was Vicki Rostovich's poem to Thomas. So it's amazing to me how these things braid together and connect on some place that we can't see but we can feel. This poem is called Orpheus. It's one of the poems that I wrote about Mount Jumbo. So full of you, I had to lie down in the golden grass with the sun coming full off the horizon, my hips attached to the earth, and dogs above me licking each other's faces. My hands, your hands. I lie upon the ground to take your weight. A sky full of honey, suspended, molten. The yellow, yellow grass waved over my head like a lion. The wind made a rustling sound. You were behind me. Eurydice, I know the law. I never looked at you. I closed my eyes, lie down, and opened my long coat. I'm going to finish with a poem called Antimatter. And like Linda, I watch TV and listen to the radio and then have fits and go to my computer or typewriter. This one, you'll hear my quote in here. This was from TV, Antimatter. End of April, winding down this false millennium, astronomers discover a monstrous black hole in deep space, 600 light years across, spewing a fountain of boiling antimatter. It's like discovering a room in your house you never knew was there, says the muscular newscaster, sparkling his dark eyes for the camera. But I've dreamed about this room for years, imagining pathways behind the walls. Antimatter, sister to this globed and palpable world, lined up in lyric disorder. It's more like not finding the room you never knew, but spent your life in. Unbeing. Does it hurt? If I get it on my skin, will I disappear? Can it make me laugh? Is it heavier than stars? Will it get me drunk and spit me out? Will I shimmer like a rotted log? So it eats daylight. Does it bounce and twirl or spill like milk? Is it everything I am not? Does it lurk in the particle garden? Why has it kept itself from us until now? Can I compare it to the loss of love? Could it be the soup of ghosts? Does it run hot and cold? Is it for sale? Should we compare it to death? Should we fear it? Should we fear anything? Thank you so much for coming.
I'm out of focus? That's a terrible thing to say to me with my low self-esteem. When did I first realize I had low self-esteem? When I realized the world was not my oyster. So, all right, that should be enough then, right?
There will be a lot of